Welcome back to Skyridge. I'm assuming you came from my last video, as that would logically make sense, and it looks like I've worked my way into this hot air balloon, and we're just coasting through the sky right now. I think we're going to be here for a while, but I'll let you know when we land, and it might take some time. But this time, we'll be starting off by talking about Tomokazu Kamiya, who worked on 7 cards for this set. The first card that they did would be the Diglett, which looks forward as a nice lake can be seen in the background, as well as the sky. The Diglett looks almost sad as well. The Ditto, which appears to be in some sort of ancient cave, with some cave paintings being shown on the wall. One of the paintings looks like Firo, and one looks like Doduo, and Ditto stands in the bottom right looking very upset. The Doug trio has faces looking in all different directions, as another large lake can be seen behind them. But I just like the expressions on the different heads, as well as the long noses on the creatures. The Golbat showcases a Golbat, obviously, as it screams down at the ground and flies through the sky. I like the thing that's etched into the ground. I'm tempted to call it a crop circle, but it's not really a circle. It's in the shape of a Pokemon. The Granbull looks extremely upset as many bushes and trees are in the background. I like how in focus Granbull is in the card, along with the intensity. The Murkrow is pretty derpy, as its beak is enormous and takes up a lot of space on the card, but I like the shape of the Murkrow, with it looking to the left almost suspiciously, and the bamboo in the background is quite nice, along with the lake and trees. And finally for Kamiya, the Venonat, which is very stylistic. I like how it looks like it's jumping upwards as the sky shines onto it, with some nice trees in the background. These Kamiya cards are all quite nice and make a good addition to the Skyridge set. Our next artist is Kagemaru Himeno, who's a name you've probably expected at this point, as they're a titan when it comes to artwork in the Pokemon TCG, so of course we'd see them here. And the first card on our list is the Wobbuffet, which showcases 2 separate Wobbuffet traveling and exploring a cave, with one of them looking back, almost shy. The Raticate looks upwards, and another one sits to the right. I like the lens flares on this card as well as the grass around them. The Teddiursa looks at the camera as it stands near a hot spring, and another one can be spotted in the background. Himeno is also able to work on some trainers for Skyridge. The Relic Hunter, which looks onwards as Zafira flies in the background. I kinda like the super big glove that the Hunter wears, and it's just a cool trainer card. The Apricorn Maker showcases, well, an Apricorn Maker. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, but I like the pose that he's in, and he just seems to be chillin' as he sits down and inspects an Apricorn, with a bunch of them around him. Of course, if you don't know, apricorns are what is used in the Pokemon games and series to make Pokeballs. The Desert Shaman holds out its arms as the moon sits in the background, and I like the faded purple background with a nice closing of the shaman. The Fisherman holds out his rod and moves one of his arms to the side, and I like the river that flows in the background. The Oracle lays down writing some kind of book, and something cool to note about this card is that it features Umbreon on it. While doing a little bit of research on this card, it turns out that the regular uncommon trainer card in this set is worth about $15 for a near mint copy, which is ridiculous. Finally, the Underground Expedition showcases some people working underground as they delve deeper into the caverns with neat little outfits. Something I'm noticing about Himeno's trainer cards is that they're all really put together and their soul is really put into the outfits of the characters. I really like the gloves and the gear. It's just super unique, and the Pokemon cards featuring multiple Pokemon will always be a plus in my book, honestly. Our next artist that we'll be talking about is Hisao Nakamura, who worked on quite a few cards in the set, starting with the Machoke, which punches a crater into the ground, with some beams of light flowing into the background. I also just like the expression of the Pokemon that as it stares forwards. The Kakuna is nice too. I like the perspective. It makes the Pokemon look quite long and very menacing, as it floats above some water and some rocks. The Poliwhirl looks to be diving into some water, as it jumps forwards with some beautiful teal water, and some light peeks onto the cave that it's in. The Rhyhorn is quite menacing. The Pokemon covers the entire card as you can see every part of its face, and the back of it is imposing and interesting. The seal seems to be scratching its head as multiple other seals swim into the water that it's inside of. The Snubbull seems to be about to be falling off of a tree as it looks down into an oasis city that was seen in previous cards. And finally, we have the Zubat, which has a whole horde of Zubat as they fly through a deep and dark cave. I love the deep and dark shading present on a lot of these cards, and the poses of the actions that the Pokemon make Nakamura's cards feel very memorable, especially a Pokemon like Machoke or Snubbull. Now, we'll talk about Shinichi Yoshida, who actually stopped creating new Pokemon cards after Skyridge, which I find very sad, as there are many iconic Pokemon cards created by Yoshida, so we'll just talk about the 3 that they did for this set, starting with the Piloswine, which sits still as it stands on top of a big rock, and I like the many different jagged rocks behind the Piloswine. The Gligar, which flies through the sky as it looks forwards angrily, with some speed lines in the background. And finally for Yoshida, the Magnemite, which just hovers through the air as a dark shadow is cast onto it. I like the muted background and colors present in Yoshida's cards, and I'm still really impressed with the pure quality of artwork that Yoshida has presented to the Pokemon TCG in their 3-ish year run in the English TCG. I'm happy to own at least one of Yoshida's cards that they have, and they will be remembered until mentioned again. Our next artist is Ayakusube, who worked again on 3 cards for Skyridge, but this time they worked on all unique cards. Firstly, we have the Arcanine. This card really gives me those majestic vibes that make this card almost look old and regal. I like how sharp Arcanine looks in this card, as well as the dark and very muted background. I really love this rendition of Arcanine, and it's just very interesting and grabbing. The Lapras swims along the water, as you can see its fins below the surface of the water, and a nice mountain can be seen and some shrubbery in the background. This card doesn't completely feature Lapras, but it is a good angle and the camera still shows off the Pokemon quite well. Finally for Kusube, the Stantler looks back at the camera as it looks up onto it, and a nice blue sky is a very nice touch. The rocks are very nice as well. I just like the little details on this card overall. Kusube is a very talented artist, and even though they only received 3 cards for the set, I'll always love that super unique shading style. Our next artist is Kimiya Masago, who always impresses with their realistic and special artworks, starting with the creepy freaking Alakazam, which stands straight and looks forward. I like the symmetry on this card, and it just looks straight scary. I mean, the pose and everything is just menacing. The Crobat hang on the tree branch above them as they hang upside down and a pack of many Crobat fly towards the camera. Even though it sort of looks like the bats are copy and pasted, they clearly aren't because you can see the slight differences in them. I mean, these are gorgeous, with the dark shading and deep lighting. The Gyarados is another symmetrical card as it stands forward and screams directly at the camera, yet another terrifying card by Masago, and I almost like the explosion-like bright oranges that can be seen in the card. And finally for Masago, they worked on the Houndoom, which howls at the sky, with a deep and dark fog surrounding the dog, and the rocks below it are barely visible. I like the dark shading on all these cards, they're so distinctive, and they're good cards for an amazing set. Our next artist will be one that's really found their footing in Aquapolis, and is back to hit more of their shading stride in Skyridge. Midori Harada has this really nice style that almost reminds me a little bit of a lighter version of Kusube's style. Starting with the fortress, I like how it's looking back at the camera, and I really like the sharp shading that really evokes the grimy and realistic kind of feeling, while still absolutely staying in the world of Pokemon. The next card is Farfetch'd, and I feel like we haven't seen him in a bit, but still, this card is cool, and I like the steam rising up from it. It looks pretty upset as it raises one of its wings up and holds its leek to the side. I like the vibe of the card quite a lot, and it sits on the little pond. The Nidorina looks at some kind of ancient ruins in confusion and intrigue. I like how segmented the different parts of the Pokemon are in the card, as well as the drastically differing colors. The Pineco looks to the right, which is funny as the fortress looks to the left, but the Pineco is cool. And I like the very wavy branches around it, and like I said, it has that really nice shading style. Then there's the Nidoran number 81, which looks confused at a Zapdos statue that faces away from the camera. I like how concerned the Nidoran card looks, and like I said with the Nidorina, I like the color contrast in the card. I like this card quite a bit. The ancient ruins have a nice deep dark lighting in the card, along with the cool pillars that make this a nice looking stadium card. The Mirage Stadium also looks nice, and I like the fake water in the background with a stadium in the foreground. I like how the sky is along with it as well. The underground lake is quite nice as well. I like how there's a little bit of water surrounding the actual stadium, and I just like when stadium cards showcase differences in the actual scenery for the cards. I like these cards by Harada, with that really unique shading style that's pleasing to the eyes. Another artist who seems to be flexing their creative muscles is Hikaru Koike, who really showed up with the Magneton from Aquapolis, but they're back to make some more really amazing cards for Skyridge, starting with the Beedrill, which flies with a pack, and even though the card is 3D generated, the shading on its style is gorgeous, with the buzzing wings around the creatures. And then there's the Jolteon, which stares forward as leaves surround them, and I like how almost small the Jolteon looks in the card, mixed with the color contrast. The Ladian flies towards the moon and some sort of pollen or some kind of flowers follow behind it, and all the other aspects of the cards. Finally for Koike, I have a card that really emits the raw energy from the other cards they've done. The Steelix. I mean, this card is just iconic for the set in my opinion. Dude, the shading in it is absurd. This Pokemon looks so dark and so menacing, with that blood red webbed background. It makes a Pokemon like Steelix look downright maniacal. I really enjoy this card, and it's a very pivotal card for this set, and I really enjoy it. I know that I split up the Aquapolis video into 2 parts, but for Skyridge, since there's so many things for me to cover, I think we should make sense for me to split this into 3 separate parts. I know that sounds kind of annoying, but trust me, it's way easier for me. Plus, I want to do this set full justice.